I had a secret love affair with a married coworker. It started with innocent flirting, the kind that feels harmless in the moment, a spark hidden beneath office banter. But it ended with me about to lose everything: my job, my reputation, my sanity. It wasn't some dramatic movie scene where a furious spouse burst through the door. No, this was quieter, slower, and 1,000 times more destructive. It was a complete corrosion of my soul, from the inside out. This is the story of how a fantasy became my worst nightmare, and what I wish I'd known before I ever crossed that line. It's about the lies we tell other people, but even more, the lies we whisper to ourselves when we want something too badly. Before him, my life wasn't bad, but it was beige. Just a flat, endless landscape of muted colors, routine, predictability. I was 27 and had been single for the better part of 2 years after a relationship that fizzled out with all the excitement of a deflating balloon. My days blended together. Wake up, fight through traffic, answer emails in a cubicle that smelled faintly of paper and burnt coffee, tick off meetings and deadlines, stumble home, microwave dinner, streaming TV, sleep, repeat. The constant hum of the AC was the soundtrack of my existence. The only creature who seemed to notice me was my cat, who usually regarded me with bored indifference. My friends were busy building lives, engagements, weddings, mortgages, while I felt like I was standing still on a crowded sidewalk, watching the world rush past. I was starving for a spark, any spark, to break the monotony. And then there was Mark. Not new, he'd been a senior manager for years. Handsome, in a crisp, conventional way, always in pressed shirts, always moving with quiet confidence. I knew of him, but I didn't know him. His desk carried a framed photo I couldn't ignore. Him, a smiling blonde wife, 2 kids on a sunlit beach, a perfect family portrait. For the longest time, he was simply background noise, the married manager from the 3rd floor, a life I had no business touching. Until, one day, he wasn't just part of the office furniture anymore. It started, as these things so often do, with a project, a high-stakes client, impossible deadlines, and a last-minute team reshuffle that placed me directly under his supervision. Suddenly, Mark wasn't just a passing face in the hallway. He was the man I was breathing the same air with for 10, sometimes 12 hours a day. The walls of the office seemed smaller at night, the fluorescent lights humming, the city outside sinking into darkness while we kept typing away. There's a strange intimacy in being the last 2 people in a building meant for hundreds. The silence makes every glance louder. The first real moment was almost nothing. We'd finally cracked a campaign problem after days of frustration. It was late, nearly 9 p.m., the office deserted. He looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "You're brilliant. I couldn't have done this without you." It wasn't the compliment. It was the way his eyes held mine just a fraction too long, as though he was searching for something. In that pause, I felt seen. Not as a project coordinator, not as another cog in the corporate wheel, but as me. The sensation was intoxicating. That was the first drop of poison. Soon, our conversations spilled beyond deadlines and client calls. Long nights turned into quiet talks about favorite old movies, obscure bands we both loved, spicy food we both craved. We found inside jokes that no one else would ever understand. Each laugh felt like a secret handshake only we shared. Then came the lunches, at first in groups, then just the 2 of us. Strategy sessions, we called them, though they had less and less to do with work. He told me about the weight of expectations, the dreams he once had before life settled him into responsibility. I confessed my frustrations with being single, the feeling of being adrift. It felt safe. It felt like a lifeline. His name in my inbox could brighten an entire day. I told myself it was just friendship, a good one, a needed one. But I knew, deep down, I wouldn't sneak off for lunch with a female colleague. I wouldn't feel my pulse race if her hand brushed mine. I was lying to myself. and that lie felt better than any truth I had known in years. The shift from friendship to something more didn't happen overnight. It was like a slow vine creeping across a wall, wrapping tighter with every secret we shared. Work emails became late-night texts, first about projects, then about nothing at all. "Did you see that email?" Became thinking of you. Every ping of my phone set off a rush in my chest I couldn't control. Mark began opening up about his marriage. He never trashed his wife outright. Instead, he painted a picture of quiet distance, of two people coexisting without really seeing each other. He said with me he felt alive again, noticed, appreciated. And I wanted to believe every word, because I was starving to feel needed. His attention was like water in the desert, and I drank greedily. I was hooked, obsessed. I analyzed every text, replayed every conversation, even stalked his wife's social media like a ghost at the edges of a life I wasn't part of. Guilt hummed constantly under the surface, sharp whenever he mentioned his kids, or when I saw that family photo on his desk. But the validation, the secret thrill of being his, was stronger than the shame. I told myself as long as it wasn't physical, it wasn't really cheating. That lie was the bridge that carried me straight to betrayal. The inevitable happened on a rainy Thursday night. We had stayed late to finish a presentation, the last two people in a building meant for hundreds. The air between us was thick with everything we hadn't said. The project was done, the official reason for spending all those hours together gone, and what lingered was a silence that felt heavier than words. Standing in the dim office kitchen with the city lights glowing outside, he said my name in a voice that carried an emotion I couldn't place. Then he stepped closer. All the lines I had drawn in my mind dissolved in an instant. When his lips touched mine, it wasn't passion or triumph, not the spark I had fantasized about. It was desperate, clumsy, and unbearably sad. The kiss wasn't a beginning, it was a fall. Minutes later, we found ourselves in a vacant office down the hall, and my mind screamed the entire time. "What are you doing? This is his wife's husband. This is his children's father." But my body betrayed me, caught in the current. When it ended, the silence between us was suffocating. He drove me to the subway without a word, only whispering, "I'll text you," before pulling away. Back in my apartment, I stared into the mirror and saw a stranger. Hollow eyes, skin pale with shame. The guilt wasn't a quiet hum anymore, it was a roar that filled the room. From then on, our so-called relationship became a roller coaster of extremes. There were the dizzy highs of stolen moments in parking garages and hotel rooms during business trips, when it felt like nothing else in the world existed, but the lows were crushing. The emptiness when he left to return to his family, the gnawing fear that we'd be discovered, the exhaustion of living a lie. He always had a home to go back to. I only had an empty apartment and the walls of our secret closing in on me. My life split in two. By day, I was the competent, friendly project coordinator, hitting deadlines and smiling in meetings. By night, I was the other woman, constantly on edge, carrying a secret I couldn't share with anyone. The mental gymnastics of keeping the story straight consumed me. I had different explanations for my friends, my family, my coworkers. Why I was suddenly private, moody, always busy. It was utterly exhausting to manage all the lies layered on top of each other. The isolation was the worst part. An affair thrives in darkness, and that darkness seeps into everything else. I couldn't tell my best friend why I was crying on the phone at midnight. I couldn't explain to my mom why I avoided talking about my love life. I carried the weight alone, ashamed to admit what I had become. That loneliness fed the obsession, tightening the toxic bond between us even more. The workplace, once where I felt connected, became a minefield. Every casual comment felt like an accusation. "You and Mark seem to be working closely. What's up?" Every time his office door closed, I panicked. Every time his wife's name flashed on his phone, my chest locked up. We had too many close calls. Like the time a colleague picked up my phone to look at a photo just as a text from him appeared, and I yanked it back, hands shaking. Or the time we were whispering in a hallway, and the department head turned the corner, giving us a look I'll never forget. Paranoia became my shadow. My own life began to collapse. I neglected friendships, stalled career moves, stopped caring for myself. My health crumbled. I lost weight. My eyes had dark circles from sleepless nights, and anxiety knotted my stomach every waking moment. I was a ghost haunting my own life, hollowed out, exhausted, consumed by a secret that demanded everything and gave nothing back. The end didn't come with fireworks or a furious confrontation. It came quietly, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was carrying a coffee back to the office when I passed by a cafe window and saw him inside. Mark was with his wife and their 2 kids. The scene was painfully simple. His son, maybe 7 years old, spilled his drink across the table. Instead of frustration, Mark laughed. He grabbed napkins, wiped the mess, ruffled his son's hair. His wife smiled at him, a warm, unguarded smile that came from years of shared life. And in that single, domestic moment, the entire fantasy I had built collapsed. He wasn't a tortured man trapped in a loveless marriage. He wasn't searching for an escape or a soulmate in me. He was a husband, a father, living a full, ordinary life that had never really been mine to touch. I froze on the sidewalk, nausea rising like a tide. My chest tightened as though all the air had been sucked from the street. I pressed against the cold brick wall, just to steady myself. In that instant, every justification, every sweet lie we had told each other, disintegrated. I wasn't his secret love. I was just a complication, a risk, a shadow lurking at the edges of his real life. And worse, I was a fool who had let my loneliness turn into self-destruction. That was the moment I finally understood. He would go home to his family, to his laughter and his smiles. And me, I would be left with nothing but shame. If I didn't end it, this secret would devour me completely. Ending it was brutal. One conversation, sharp as a knife, where I finally poured out everything. The guilt, the shame, the feeling that I was falling apart. I expected him to fight, to beg, to at least hesitate. Instead, he looked almost relieved. That was maybe the cruelest cut of all. For me, it was a cataclysm. For him, it was just a problem quietly solved. He agreed to stop all contact, and that was that. The aftermath was a new kind of hell. At work, we went from sharing every glance to acting like strangers forced to breathe the same air in meetings. Each encounter was a fresh wave of grief and humiliation. Within 3 months, I couldn't stand it anymore and left for a new job. I knew I couldn't heal in the same place where I had broken myself so completely. Recovery wasn't quick. It took more than a year before I felt remotely like myself again. Grieving an affair feels strange. How do you mourn something you never should have had, but I had to? Therapy finally gave me the clarity I lacked. I realized I hadn't really been searching for Mark. I'd been searching for validation, for someone to quiet the emptiness I carried inside. He was never the cure. He was the symptom. The greatest lesson I learned is this: you cannot build happiness on the wreckage of someone else's family. The thrill is fleeting, but the damage is lasting. To them, and especially to yourself. It strips away your integrity, your trust in your own judgment, and leaves behind a shame that lingers long after the secret ends. It has been for years since I last saw Mark. I live in a different city now, with a different job, and a relationship that is healthy, honest, and real. I told my partner about my past from the very beginning. No lies, no shadows. Some days, the old shame still flickers, but it no longer defines me. I've forgiven myself, slowly, painfully, for the choices I made when I was lost. The affair almost destroyed me, but it forced me to face my own demons and to find color in my life again, this time from within. The price was devastatingly high, but if there's one thing I know now, it's this: a life built on secrets will always, always leave you alone in the dark. That was my choice, and it nearly destroyed me. Tell me, if you were in my place, would you have walked away, or done the same?
Seems like you've been busy since you went away. I'm just flipping through your pictures, I can tell you look more than okay. Think I need help to feel as happy as you.